Okay, this is exercise 1.04, statistics in society. Now, the word statistics originally meant information about the state, so stat looks like it comes from the word state, or information about the state in or country or nation. Today, but statistics is the science of collecting, classifying and analysing any kind of information, while the singular word statistic means a numerical value such as the mean or range, or remember we do mode or median, if you remember those from year 8, 9 and 10, that is calculated from a set of data. So a statistic is when you're performing analysis of data, okay? Now, governments, businesses and other organisations collect and use statistics to plan and make intelligent decisions for the future. For example, the government ministers want to know how many people use public transport. A baby goods manufacturer wants to test the safety of a new high chair, so they might run a survey or of some sort, or they'll look at certain statistics or something. The owner of a chain of coffee shops wants to decide where to open the next shop, okay? So they'll collect data to work that out. The directors of an international relief agency need to find out which countries require aid most urgently, so they would collect data. And the marketing staff of an electronics company want to know when to introduce a new mobile phone, okay? So there are 6 stages in a statistical investigation, and you need to know these steps. Now, step 1 is posing questions. So this is always the first step. So before an investigation can begin, the researcher needs to determine clearly the key questions of the study. They need to know the aims of the study, the ideas and the topics of concern. The next thing that they will do is collect data, okay? So in this posing questions, they're going to have to come up with the questions that they need to ask, okay? Then that will answer the question that they want to know something about, okay, or whatever they're concerned about. The next step is to collect the data, so that's stage 2. So according to the ABS, which is the Australian Bureau of Statistics, data are observations or facts which, when collected, organised and evaluated, become information. So you start with data. When you do something with that data, it becomes information. Collecting data usually requires a great deal of work and time when the researcher goes out into the field to find the necessary facts through surveys, interviews, questionnaires, observations, tests, experiments, and through looking at existing records. Okay, now a lot of data is collected like that as well. Once we've collected the data, we need to organise the data. So far, we're going to find out what questions we're going to ask. We're going to collect the data. Once we've got that data, we need to organise it. Now, once the raw data has been collected, it's converted into meaning information for further study. You might, for example, put the data, you want to group it and order it and classify it in different ways, into different categories perhaps. You can put it into lists. Often it's put into tables or spreadsheets. Okay, now you've seen data tallies and all that, and we'll be doing some of those later, okay, or different categories for your data as well. Then the data needs to be summarised and displayed, so any patterns or trends are clearer. So when you display data graphically, when you can see a line graph or a stem and leaf plot or other sorts of graphs like a sector graph or something like that, you can see trends and patterns more clearly rather than looking at numbers, okay? So line graph might show trends over time. Stem and leaf plot might show, it actually will look like, it'll just show how many are in the 10s, in the 20s, in the 30s, etc. And then we'll look at things like the mean, mode, median or range. You'll be able to see things like that a lot better. So for example, when you've got your data in order from lowest to highest, you can find the range quite easily, which is the highest minus the lowest, or you can see which data score occurs the most often, or you can see roughly where the middle of the data, which is called the median, would be. Okay, and so these we calculate these from your data, and they're called summary statistics. Okay, so summarizing the data, displaying it, and also doing working out or doing these calculations, including mean, mode, median, and range. Now, analyzing the data means to examine the data in closer detail, and it's the most important stage of your investigation. So it involves comparing your statistics and looking for significant results that will answer your questions from part one. Okay, and so that's like analysing and drawing conclusions. Okay, and then one can make important decisions based on and recommendations based on the data that you've collected. And the last step is to write a report. And in that report, you'll summarise your aims, your methods, maybe tabulate your findings and write your conclusions. So here is an example looking at the 6 stages. So here is the question. So suppose the state government is investigating the best location to build a new hospital. Describe what might happen at each of the 6 stages of the investigation. So you're going to have to know what the 6 stages are and their order. So remember, we're trying to build a new hospital and we want to find the best location. So some sort of questions might be, which location is central to most areas? You don't want a hospital that, let's say, all the people live here and the hospital is over here. Hospital needs to be close to needs to sort of be in the centre of where this big population might be. Also, which location has the fastest growing population? So in which areas are there more people living now? Okay, which location, because if you've got a fast growing population, you're going to need a new hospital to be able to service those people, and which location has the facilities and road networks to support a new hospital. So we have to make sure that the infrastructure is there as well. And it's not just, it could be public transport as well, because not everyone drives to the hospital. Okay. Part 2, you have to collect your data. So the researcher will look at existing records, like maybe the population of people in that area, the ages of people in that area. Okay, might already look and see where the nearest hospital is, for example, might conduct surveys of people to get their opinion and some interviews as well. Once that, so that is what would be involved in collecting data. So it won't be just conducting surveys and interviews. They might be looking at census information, seeing how many people live in a particular area. Okay, so that's what we mean by looking at existing records. Okay, organising data, so they'll put all of that data into a table, okay, and showing the features of each possible location for the hospital. So there might be, obviously you're not just going to look at one location, you'd have to be comparing some locations. In summarising and displaying the data, the researcher can calculate statistics or use graphs to compare the locations and look for a pattern. Some sort of statistics might be the spread of the ages of people in that immediate population. All right, maybe how many people there are per, like if they have different areas, how many people a existing hospital might be servicing. Okay, so that's sort of some of the data that they might look at. Okay. Also need to look at the age of the population as well. Now, analysing data and drawing conclusions, they'll then look at their data and patterns in more detail and try to make a definite decision about where the best location for the hospital should be. And then in the stage 6, they'll write a report. So they'll have to write what their aims were, how the data was collected, the patterns, the results, and what their recommendations were for where this new hospital should be. Okay? Now, question 5 from this exercise, it says, at what stage of a statistical investigation does the researcher make a decision or recommendation after the results of the study becomes clear. Okay, you can think of what that might be, and that would be stage 5. Once they've analysed the data, they'll draw conclusions, and when those conclusions are drawn, they can make a decision, basically, from there. And then they'll write the report after that. Okay, so it's stage 5, analysing data and drawing conclusions. So first one, stage 5, analysing data and drawing conclusions. Okay, the first one, determine the key goals and issues. That would be in stage 1, posing questions. C, calculate statistics from the data and look for some relationship between them. So once you've organised the data, you'll summarise and display it. And when you summarise and display, that's when you'll calculate your statistics and then look for patterns or come up with, look for patterns or some relationship between your data. So that is in stage 4, summarising and displaying. And the last question, gather raw data. So these are pretty straightforward. Gather raw data required. Obviously, this is in stage 2, collecting your data. So you really need to know the 6 stages. You need to know them in order, and you need to know what's involved in each stage.